Like I do a lot of prompts, and one of the quotes I always repeat is the absence of what I want doesn't negate the presence of what I have. Just because you're able to say I want more or I want better, and it could be very valid that yeah, you deserve more, you deserve better. Just because you could point your finger at what that is, it doesn't cancel out all the things you have. And I think we're uncomfortable sometimes living in ambiguity where two truths can coexist at once. We like absolutes and we like good guys and bad guys and winners and losers. And I think that absolutism of logic sometimes sets us up to be a little unhappy in a self-sabotaging way. So for me, it's if I have joy, I have joy. If there could be more joy, that's great. But I don't need that more to appreciate the smaller joy I have. How people treat you is a reflection of how they feel about themselves. Like all the cliches, but it's proven to be true. It's like kindness is like a mirror for them. All of a sudden you just put this mirror up and they're like, oh, I was a jerk. I was projecting. I was, 9 times out of 10, that'll be the outcome. And if it's not, then, they've got some deep issues.
The big silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here.
The Big Silence. The Big Silence.
Welcome to the Big Silence podcast. Casey Kinney.
There you go. 2 options.
Yeah. So happy you're here in Austin, Texas. And we were connected through our friend Chris at Purpose Built, who's doing great things, and excited to get to know you. I've seen you through social media and all the great things that you're doing on there and spreading positivity and being a mindfulness expert. So first of all, what are you doing in Austin?
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me, inviting me to your home. It's very, very kind of you. I'm here hanging out with friends. I got a friend who lives here, one of my best friends. And then he also has gone through a lot of life changes, but he's a breathwork practitioner down here. So when I decided to visit him, I was like, well, why don't we team up and do something? Because I do these guided journaling events all over the country where it's, me talking and taking people through kind of my form of mindfulness and journaling. And I'm like, why don't we team up? These are 2 great modalities. Why don't we do journaling and then breathwork and then journaling and breathwork and kind of like come in and out. So we did that on Thursday. And it was great. And it was really special too, to be able to like do it with a friend who were like civilians normally, but then we teamed up in like a professional sense. So it was really rewarding.
I love it that you do breath work because a lot of times men don't open up like that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I'm in Mr. Sensitive
Mr.
in a good way, like vulnerable way, not in like a whiny way,
Yeah. Well, you just met Bobby, my husband, and he'll hate me for saying this, but we did.
Do it. You walked away.
We did breath work together. It was his first time, and he had this like he didn't know what to expect. And it was at home with Gwen Dittmar, who's been on the pod, and I work with her a lot. And he was just overcome with so much emotion to the fact that he was screaming.
Yeah.
And letting it out. And he didn't, again, privacy of our home, and Gwen had to hold him. And afterwards, he was almost embarrassed. And this was a few years ago, so he's very open to it now. But he was like, what just happened?
That's very common. Like, it's funny when we had people at the studio where we did it on Thursday night, we had everyone sign a waiver beforehand. Just because, if you have an underlying condition and you get too aerobic. And they were like, what are we doing here? Because like breathwork really is full mind and body. Like it is an experience. Like you're tingling and, your eyes are watering, and that could turn into tears and like big moments of like catharsis. So yeah, it's really beautiful. Like my whole thing in like the wellness space and mindfulness is like really trying to encourage people to approach it from the most practical way possible. I think sometimes you think about things like stigma or just like friction when it comes to people being willing to be vulnerable and doing certain elements of mindfulness. I think a lot of times it comes from, sometimes we use words that are a little off-putting because people don't know what they are. Vibrations and chakras and frequencies and manifestation, abundance, great words, of course. But sometimes we're like, I don't really know what that is. So that's why like I'm a big proponent specifically of journaling and breath work. So practical. When you do both of them, you have no choice but to be present. So if anything, you get the being present bonus of doing it, and then you get all the added benefit. But very practical forms of mindfulness. That's why I'm so drawn to them.
But can you explain what happens to the mind and body for someone who hasn't done breath work? Because we all know, I think meditation is getting a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah.
It's still a little scary.
Yeah.
But then breath work comes in and it's a little bit different. Can you explain?
For sure. Well, you should have my friend Mike here to explain more of it. I'm like a civilian when it comes to breath work. I mean, for me, I think that like, you know, in addition to all the like biochemistry that happens when you're oxygenating and doing all that crazy stuff, like the thing that I really noticed from our session that I thought was like a really beautiful like analogy into some of my work was, you know, we were laying down and we had our eyes closed and we were doing these sessions. We did for about 45 minutes of all these different, you know, 4-8-4 breathings and all these different things. And Mike would instruct us, you know, every time to loosen a little bit more and let your body sink a little bit more into the floor. And what I thought was so interesting is every time he said it 4 or 5 times, I found another level to loosen even more, which I thought was, for one, so interesting of just how much tension we hold in our body. So if anything, breathwork is a great tension release. But it's like every time I was like a little bit looser. Like every time when you thought you were as loose as possible, you kept going. And I thought that was just beautiful for my work when it comes to the written word to evoke vulnerability. There's so many layers that you can continue to go. And I just thought that was so beautiful physically and emotionally and like vulnerability wise. I thought it was a beautiful understanding of it for me.
Yeah, from my experience, it's a great way also to release trauma in your body.
For sure.
And that's where like the screaming or the crying, the tears, like there's so much that we hold in our body. And I've also heard that it can be the same experience as ayahuasca, but without doing the ayahuasca. Have you ever done ayahuasca?
I haven't. No.
Me either. We're like the only ones in Austin who have it.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't tell people that. We don't want to be the outsiders. But I've just never felt the need. You know, I feel like who knows? I mean,
who knows? I'm open to anything. I don't judge any, but I have not done. I've done plenty of other things in my life.
Yeah.
Plenty.
Yeah.
I'm like, ketamine treatment for therapy now. I'm like, that's why I'm okay now because I did plenty of ketamine in my days.
Got it out of your system for sure. Yeah.
So you now, and there's always the why of what you do, what your work is. You know, you speak about meditation. You have your book, That's Bold of You, How to Thrive as Your Most Vibrant, Weird, and Real Self. But where do you come from?
For sure. Yeah. So like, I mean, a lot of people know me for my book and writing, and I host a podcast on SiriusXM. I've been doing it for a long time. That's me taking my hope for humanity and spreading optimism. Like that's what I want to spread. I think more specifically, you know, I'm passionate about the concept of mindfulness as an umbrella for all these things. And to answer your question, I mean, so I'm 36, went through many versions of myself. I think this all started when I was 29. I think in most of my 20s, to my point earlier, I was really kind of averse to wellness and mindfulness because, again, I would hear these words and I'd be like, well, that's for other people. I don't understand it, therefore it can't be for me. And then also kind of as a stereotypical man, jock-esque type fella, I was like, well, I'm just power through. Like, let's just do this thing. And like vulnerability, commitment, patience, certainly not my virtues. And, you know, I don't have a particular like rags to riches type, you know, crumble and rebuild story. It's as simple as when I was like 29, I was working in advertising. I was working in advertising sales. And, you know, I really liked who I'd become as like a salesperson, right? It's in advertising technology sales, make a lot of money, lead a team, very much identified as that person. But it was this detecting all these versions of myself that I was so confident in my career, but as like a man, I did not know who I stood for, what I stood for. And I was just very frustrated with the fact that I just felt like I was borrowing so many different things in life, expectations, timelines, who I am, how I should act, all these things. And I just really didn't like that fact that I felt like there were so many different versions of me. Like, why can't I just be the same guy and be confident in that path and not feel like I have to impress these people or these people, you know, just classic finding your way type stuff in your 20s. But I was really frustrated by that fact. And so when I was 29, I just started the podcast because I saw it at the time as a creative outlet to force myself to be vulnerable. So I was like, I'm very type A, and I don't like the fact that in some instances I'm very confident and others I'm not. I feel like I'm borrowing here, copying and pasting. I just didn't like that fact. So it's like, I'm going to do the podcast. I'm not going to do guests or anything like that because that's part of the problem. I'm borrowing from people, and I'm just going to take topics, questions, anxieties, things that bother me, and I'm just going to beat it up through logic and experience for like 20 minutes. And long story short, I mean, basically what I realized through that process is I was practicing a very practical form of mindfulness, the art of being present in how I feel, radical non-judgment of those feelings, using my experiences, the lens of my experiences to come up with these answers. Why do I feel this way? What is my source of truth? Where is it coming from? And I mean, it completely changed my life just doing that and the repetition of doing that. Now I've done, close to 700 episodes of that. You can't help but grow over 7 years. I mean, think about who you were 7 years ago, like totally who I was different. 7 years ago, who I was 2 years ago. Like I've changed so much. So that's the long of the story. It's in a very like meta way in that I still do the podcast and it's kind of what I do professionally. It started with that. And then from there, it segued into writing and all these different things. And, my passion for journaling specifically as a way to evoke some of those truths. But yeah, it really just started with that frustration of not feeling like I was ever being true to myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to regret that. And I've always been kind of like creative. Like I went to Waldorf school growing up. I majored in Chinese in college. Like I've always been like a little off in that sense, non-traditional. So I was like, let me just do this thing and force myself. And it's been a beautiful path since.
I love that you say you don't have that rags to riches story, because I have been approached by people who are like, but I don't have my story. But I believe that we all have a story. And sometimes it's looked down upon if you don't have, quote unquote, a story.
Yeah.
But your story is like you at 29, you're like, there's something I want more of. There's always something we dive deeper into ourselves to figure ourselves out more and then help humanity. And I don't think you have to have a story like mine or many other people who are out there working in self-development. So I think that's a great message. And you being a man who is helping other men be vulnerable.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think everyone's got an amazing story and wisdom to share, regardless of where it came from. If it came from a place of breaking free of comfort or it came from a place of loss and trauma, like it's equally as valid. I just think about how much I've grown personally and like the resistance I felt in the beginning, especially because I identified so much by my job, making money, being a corporate gung-ho charisma guy. Just like how much I've dropped my guard from then has just been like so freeing and like completely different person in that sense. And like to me, if that's something that inspires other people to do the same, then it doesn't matter what the context of where it came from is necessarily. It's encouraging people to do the same.
So where were you born?
I was born in Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah. Okay. And your parents?
Chicago.
Together?
Yes.
Still together? Okay.
Still together. Yeah.
Okay. And you are you in a relationship?
I am. Yeah. I live with my girlfriend in Miami.
How long have you been together?
About 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. I heard you talk about relationships on your podcast and on other podcasts. And it was something you were talking about, being in a relationship, but still having independence and not being dependent. I love that because with Bobby and I, we are very independent, do our own thing. And I think it's so important. And listening to you say this stuff, because sometimes people think like, wait, you're not with your husband. You're traveling on a solo trip. You're doing this. He's doing this. I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Don't give me too much room to talk about it, because I'll talk for an hour about it, because I feel like I'm coming out with a new book with Penguin next year about this topic. Well, at least not necessarily about that, but this was the idea that made me want to write this book about redefining love and having independence be a defining feature of it. Because even that, the way that you say that certain people are like, well, why aren't you together? Why aren't you traveling together? What's wrong?
Guys okay?
The fact that people think that is wrong, I think we need to reset everything. I did an episode on the podcast a while ago about this thing called the dependency paradox, which is just a coined term from sociologists and psychologists in child rearing between the child and the caregiver. That like how close they are in a good way. Good dependency, not codependency. Good dependence encourages independence in the child, right? If the child knows his mother loves him to the ends of the earth and will protect him, the child is willing to take a first step, hurt himself, do these things. And I always thought that was very interesting, of course, but I was like, shouldn't that be how adulthood is with relationships? The more you have that bond, and there's no question about it, the more independent you should be encouraged to feel, because you've got each other's back, and it doesn't change anything that one day I'll do this and my girlfriend does something else. Like that, I think, is the defining feature of a relationship, and both from the perspective of encouraging you to maintain your independence and also ridding ourselves of this weird judgment of others and ourselves and think, oh, is something wrong? And we actively self-sabotage when we start having thoughts like that. Well, why did he want to go watch football with his friends this weekend instead of hang out with me? What's wrong with me? Rid ourselves of that that type of talk.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And even so, I have some single gals now in like the dating world. Obviously, I've been with Bobby for 12 years, but I witnessed the dating world out there, like with my friends. It's tough.
Tough out there.
And it's either I don't need you from either partner or overextending. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think on the overextending side, I mean, normal things, right? I really am resistant to some of social media just villainizing everyone, and everyone is, oh, you're an avoidant attachment. That's why this, and all men are this, and all women are this. I really try to avoid talk about just, oh, the state of modern dating is horrible. Like, we're all just making choices. We're all trying to do the best thing for us. But I do think reframing around, again, the purpose of a relationship is really important. I was with Rachel Hollis a couple years ago, who wrote Girl Wash Your Face. Great.
Yeah, she's here in Austin. Yeah.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was at her home in LA.
Okay.
And she just made an offhand comment, which I thought was so powerful. She was talking about how from her divorce and dating again, she was talking about how she just decided she no longer wants someone to build a life with. She just wants someone to do life with. And we glossed over it real fast, but I think that idea is so emblematic of how we need to reframe. For one, just putting the pressure on finding a partner so that you could finally build your dream life. As if, like, what are you doing before then? You're just twiddling your thumbs. You're not living your life. You need to wait for a partner to live your life. And, these are simple things that I'm saying, but I really, the point of a relationship is to amplify the existing joy and happiness and independence you've found for yourself. And if you haven't found that for yourself, I think we've skipped a major step of thinking that a relationship is going to deliver those things for us. So, I mean, I get it. There are social pressures, there's parental pressures, there's biological pressures. Like, I understand all these things, but so often we let those dictate our headspace around relationships. And then it's no wonder we're frustrated and all these different kinds of things. So, I mean, it's a cliche to say, focus on yourself, but I think
you should focus on yourself.
Absolutely should. It's like a requirement. They should be able to measure that. Let me see how much you focused on yourself to make sure we're, we qualify for each other.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. Like, you have to love yourself, be happy with yourself, what you're doing, and order. If I hated myself, I would project upon my husband.
Yeah.
And we would be divorced immediately.
Yeah. We self-sabotage.
And it's the simple things. It's simple. We all know this. Yes. But okay, so you're 29, you're having this shift. But did you seem very wise in doing something in social. Obviously, you're on social media. You have over 1 million followers. You create content. Like, how is that transition from being in sales to then being a forward-facing person, giving your opinion, having your quotes? And most of your Instagram is like thoughts that you've written out.
Yes, that's literally it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's great. I mean, it was an easy transition for me personally because it's not like out of nowhere. I just had these thoughts. I just wasn't projecting them previously. I mean, it was definitely a big identity shift. I remember my mom didn't really mean it this way, but when I told her I was leaving my job to do this full time, she's like, "Oh, you're going to throw that all away?" And that phrase kind of hurt me. Throw it. I was like, "I'm not throwing it away. This is the next chapter that I was building, and this is the thing." I mean, it is weird. I mean, because I say I make my living from sharing my feelings, which is not a traditional career path. And my family is lawyers, doctors, very traditional. So definitely was a big shift for me. But it was easy in the sense of like what I wanted to get out of it. And like my big thing about the space is, think about like I say what I do is mindfulness. And mindfulness is one of those words that means many different things to different people. And there's no wrong definition. And however you practice mindfulness is how you practice. And it's a beautiful thing. I think most of our understanding of mindfulness as a overarching umbrella, and then you could break that down into different things, is mindfulness is the art of being present in some way, right? Present in your mind, your body, present in feeling how you feel, accepting it. And I think that's fantastic. For me, as a regular guy, as a type A guy, as a guy who thrives off of doing and not necessarily just sitting, I've really found it so energizing and really kind of helped rid myself of doubt when I say, okay, mindfulness for me is listening to yourself, but it's also learning to talk to yourself. And that's why like everything I do is really geared towards optimism, short quotes, mantras, affirmations, reminding ourselves of hope instead of just beating ourselves over the head with social media and these things that just remind us of, very valid hurt and pain and frustration in life. But if I can spread some optimism for myself, first and foremost, again, everything, the podcast was for myself. At the end of the day, you know, it was an easy transition because it just feels good to create optimism and share it. And when you see how people gravitate towards it, it's the most rewarding thing in the world. And so it's been an somewhat easy transition in that sense. I mean, so many difficulties around, how do I make money from this? Like I did well in my sales career. And like all of a sudden now I got to figure out how to make money from writing quotes and books and podcasting, difficult things.
Yeah.
So it was a shift, but I think just being so locked into the mission and passionate about perhaps encouraging people to introduce a new definition of mindfulness, not just listening, but learning to talk to yourself. I think it's really helped people get out of funks sometimes where we listen too much and we're just, you talk to a psychologist, they say rumination is both a symptom and cause of depression and, you know, anxious thinking. It's like, well, how do we allow ourselves to be present? And then how do we break free? And that's what I'm, you know, dedicated myself to.
Right. And you have such simple, short ways of shifting that mindset. I mean, it's even waking up in the morning. That's like when we're, a lot of people, myself included, that even typically for myself, wake up in this state of anxiety. I don't know, just for me, it's like you wake up and you're like fight or flight.
Yeah,
but then I literally have like a little, I just say, you're safe. This is a great day.
Yeah.
You have a roof. I immediately switch into like shifting your mindset first thing in the morning. Yeah. Because it's just built in our minds of fight or flight.
For sure. Well, I mean, I'm not big on like the science side of things so much, but like it's been very proven and studied around repeating mantras and affirmations. It helps rewire your reward center in your prefrontal cortex. And that's what provides you with resilience and self-worth. So I used to be very resistant. What do you want me to look in the mirror and repeat an affirmation? That's goofy. And yeah, it is goofy, but it actually works. And
it is goofy, but it's wonderful. And
how much
do you feel? And you get rid of all that cortisol and like all the things.
And I think that was like my problem in my 20s. And I think so many people are resistant to like being cringe, being weird, being like, if you look at my quotes, I'm always talking about being weird. Yeah. And I don't know. I just think it's changed my life to like intentionally be cringe.
What's the weirdest, cringiest thing that you do for your mindfulness?
I mean, I've done these dance music meditations where I team up with like big DJs and they'll play a set and I'll do the voiceover. I've done those live in front of people. Yeah. I'm a classic white guy, you know, hands at, you know, 3 and 9 type guy. So for me to get up in front of people and like encourage them to dance is probably like my biggest fear, if I'm honest. And like my biggest cringe. And I've done those live, in front of big groups. And like, not only is that a way that I lead, but it's a way that I practice as well. So yeah.
I don't even think that's weird. I was just in Dallas yesterday and was up on stage and I got this girl, we were talking about superpowers and I was going around to the audience and I was like, what's your superpower? She's like, to write lyrics and sing. I was like, come on up here. And like, I'm the most introverted, quiet person. And we just started dancing and she was singing, but like that little shift in the way we move our bodies and we get outside of our comfort zone is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I'm
so
not a good dancer.
I mean, I'm the same way. I'm very introverted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm introverted. I think being in sales kind of brought out, a more extroverted side, but I prefer silence. I prefer hanging out. Yeah. Just like me and my girlfriend are alone. Like, I recharge that way, not the other way. But there's something powerful about flipping that switch and like embracing that in some moments. And it's just like, it changes everything.
I mean, sometimes here, even in my house or my property in the morning, I just blast music and I dance by myself. I love a good solo dance party.
Of course. Same. Samesies. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say my mindful practice always requires dance music, like house music. I don't think I've ever written anything of merit without house music. There's something very specific about house music, the break, build, drop, just the way that it's structured that just makes me feel. Yeah. Like if I just try to like create feelings out of nowhere, it's like I'm a little resistant to it. I need the right like catalyst, and it's always been dance music for me. Yeah. And now my girlfriend's a DJ, so we are like a perfect match for each other. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah. It's funny how those things happen.
So what is your daily practice? You wake up. What do you do? What's your mindfulness? What's your schedule? Do you work out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we work out every day. You see all these like wellness hardos and it's all about their morning routines. Yeah. I don't have a morning routine. I get up, I have coffee, start writing when I feel like it. Yeah, I'm really not that structured. I'm very disciplined as far as like I have to have this done today and I'll find the time to get it done.
Yeah.
But usually it's I'm writing quotes or I'm finishing up my next book. And I always prefer to break any output into like two sections, usually the night before and that day of. So I always need a time to like start, step away, marinate, and come back to it. So like I've got crazy person documents all over the house where I've like written little scribbles and I'm coming back to it. It's like I'm writing a crazy manifesto, but like most of my writing honestly comes from like prompts that I give myself.
Yeah.
I'm not good at just sitting down and being like, right, I need a prompt. Like love is blank, or like I react to other people's writing a lot. Like, a lot of it's very derivative in the sense that someone will say, a underrated form of love is XYZ. I'm like, that's really interesting. What, to me is a true underrated form of love. So I'll fill in the blank myself and I'll just write from that prompt. And I think that's what really got me into guided journaling as well, of like someone who is traditionally resistant to sharing, but also because of that resistant, unpracticed in the art of vulnerability, which it is an art. Like I think we're all wired to be emotionally in touch with ourselves, but if we've been blocking it for so long vocally, we struggle to find the right words. And I think also particularly in this day and age where social media, which I love, I'm a big fan of social media, but sometimes it's therapy languaged us out of knowing what we're actually saying. So how do we encourage ourselves to use relatable language to describe how we're feeling, how we want to feel? So a lot of my practice, I call it golden retriever language. It's like, how can we just simplify the language as much as humanly possible and put words that we actually know what they mean, and we don't diagnose ourselves with, well, it's because you're this attachment style or you're this thing. Leave that to the professionals, which is great. But yeah, most of my writing is coming from the simplest common denominator possible.
I love golden retriever style. I mean, when I think of golden retriever, my body just like calms down.
Right?
If I didn't have 5 Pomeranians already, I told Bobby, I'm like, I want a golden
Got
retriever.
the Paw Patrol out there.
What do you do for your workout?
Traditional bro split.
Bro?
Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, I work out 6 days a week. I'm doing more cardio. I used to like be a notorious no cardio guy, just like lift weights. But like now I'm trying to live longer, and I'm actually enjoying cardio. Like I'm doing more cold plunges, and it's funny though. 36, still feel very young, and I don't necessarily look 36. Look in my 30s, but like things start hurting randomly. Something I'm like, I really want to take care of myself, and I want to be there for my family when I have a family. So I'm like, in a very mature way that I never thought I would have. I'm like, no, that I'm working out today for my children. It's weird. It's a weird shift.
When you're older, I know now it's like, okay, mobility, got to be able to pick
stretching.
myself. Yes, stretch.
I was talking to my friend Mike earlier, and we were like we realized that anytime we would like get up or sit down, we were like grunting. I'm like, we never used to be those guys. And I'm not, doing that thing where I'm like, we're old, because we're still so young, of course. But it's funny how we're doing these things.
I know, and I used to be like so quiet about it, like, ow, my back. But then I asked people, I'm like, does your back hurt, or do your feet hurt? Or like,
right.
But
this is all of us, right?
Cold plunging. I love a good cold plunge. Do you have one at home?
I don't have one at home. We have one at the gym, so I'll go to the gym and do it.
Yeah, it's life-changing for me. Not only for inflammation, but meditation. It's like such a great thing.
Feels so good after.
And of course, not everybody has the privilege of having a cold plunge at home or the gym, but a cold shower. Like anytime for when you're thinking of mindfulness, it's such a great thing, because if I would wake up with anxiety, and I don't as much anymore since some things are in my past, but Bobby would be like, get in that cold plunge. Let's go. You meditate, you breathe, you connect with yourself, and it's back to that. I am safe. I am here. I am present. I am safe. So I think that cold therapy is one of the best modalities.
Talking about in the beginning, I said journaling, breath work, force you to be present, and then cold plunge would be in the 3, of course, as well. You can't help but be anywhere else when you're cold plunging. You can't worry about your taxes or whatever you got on your mind. You are
taxes,
cold.
Relationship, work. Nope. Just getting in the water.
Not dying.
Okay, so that's bold of you. What were your thoughts going into this book?
Yeah, my thoughts were twofold. First, realized how easily we allow ourselves and other people to dictate who we are based on the words that we use, specifically labels, right? You are too needy, you're too loud, you're too quiet, you're too this, you're too that, you're too dramatic, you're too much. And I just realized how easily we allow other people to dictate that for us just by the language they use. And then how, if we don't have that introspection and push back, and specifically the second part of mindfulness, learning to talk to ourselves, how quickly we become those very things by association. And I was frustrated by that. Just the way that human language can dictate who we decide we are, just words, right? It's amazing what happens if you tell yourself that you're too dramatic.
Because it could just be you're standing up for yourself.
It could be, because one person decided that your truth was too much for them and suddenly you're too dramatic or you're too sensitive. It's amazing what could happen if you don't question that. And of course, there's a line here, of course, right? We're not allowing ourselves to be unhinged, emotional leaning creatures, but I just thought the language was so interesting to me. So like, how do we push past that? So that was first motivation. The second motivation was our second chapter in there about the beautiful mess effect, which was this study that I read about that basically showed, vulnerability as a defining feature of what we look for in other people, friends, colleagues, lovers, about how we crave vulnerable people. Vulnerable meaning a variety of things, both from being emotionally vulnerable and honest to being weird, quirky, out there, being the person who's willing to go first. Like we love that in other people. But for some reason, the same exact behavior in ourselves, we just assume that everyone will hate it in us. So I read that study and, it's just a very easy study, but it basically showed a little bit of how hypocritical we are when it comes to unfairly judging ourselves. And just those two things of the labels we give ourselves, how unfair we are to ourselves. I just thought it just needed a refresh. And I thought it is a bold idea, perhaps, to be a little stubborn in allowing other people to dictate who you are and pushing back on your own immediate snap judgment's a bold thing. So I wrote it from that perspective.
I know it's so interesting. I always say, do whatever you want in life, be bold, be loud, but just be a good damn person.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you will always have judgment. Have you ever had anyone criticize you on social media? And
oh my gosh. Have you been on the internet lately? You could say the most middle of the ground road thing and someone will come at you.
What's your advice on that? Or how do you move through that? Because obviously I've been on social media since before Instagram was a thing, and and have been through it all, and now in a place where I always say, just be you as long as you're a good damn person.
Yeah.
How do you move through that? Do you pay attention to it? Do you look at it?
Well, I think my motivation has changed too. Like at some point, when I was first getting started, I had 200,000 followers. Like, oh man, I'm an influencer, and it's cool when people recognize me. Now I don't want any of that. I want name recognition, but not face recognition, right? That's what I want as like a person of impact. Like I want to make an impact, and it's great to have followers, and it's important. But I have no motivation anymore to be someone who is like celebritized through the internet, and that's why I've really leaned into just writing. So I don't really care about video, whatever. So for one, that's changed things. I don't need people to love me or like Case Kenny. I just want the message to help them. And then I think I've just realized, it takes self-control to realize this, but I get a fair amount of hate messages, usually coming from people who, say that, well, your writing is so unaware, and that's, the reality of life is not that, and like, stop trivializing this and that. And, or people who, are jealous or whatever it may be. But sometimes I'll respond to people who message me. So I remember someone messaged me recently, and it was literally just a message of F you. And I don't know why I responded. Normally I wouldn't respond to something like that because it's just no reason. But I responded back. I was like, I hope you have a good day or something.
Yeah, I would be like, I love you too.
Yeah, but literally like they kill them with kindness. And then the next day they responded back like, hey, I'm so sorry, man. Like I was going through this and that. And I just reached out to you and was just projecting my fault. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened. And I think there's a big truth there. How people treat you is a reflection of how they feel about themselves. Like all the cliches, but it's proven to be true.
I will tell you, every time someone comes at you angry, if you respond with kindness, and going back to how you use the word optimism, they will come back and be like, damn,
it's like kindness is like a mirror for them. All of a sudden you just put this mirror up and they're like, oh, I was a jerk. I was projecting. So usually that's always the case. I would say, you know, 9 times out of 10, that'll be the outcome. And if it's not, then, you know, they've got some deep issues, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing too, is you just keep going, putting out the optimism, the positivity, because that's like each person that you can touch with like one little sentence or word, and they
yes.
can reflect on themselves and be like, okay, you know, you can either live in the world as the victim or take these scenarios and learn lessons and be victorious, or what, you
Yeah,
know,
imagine
it's
that. Imagine, you know, deciding how you react to life around you and if this helps fuel that. But I mean, it's been really cool. Like in the beginning, you know, I had, you know, and I still have imposter syndrome. I think it's healthy to
Dude.
have a little bit of it. It'd be
Mhm.
weird if I was fully confident in everything. Well, that's the other thing. I think, you know, for me, the more you do and lead in a wellness area, the more humble you need to become. Like, because the
Yeah.
more you realize you don't know.
Oh,
Like, I just finished my next book, and after I wrote it, I was like, oh, like there's so much more to this that I don't know, and it just humbles you.
yeah.
So I think that's like a really good quality to look for in people. Not that I'm trying to be noble by saying how humble I am. I'm not sure you can call yourself humble, but I think it's a good measure of someone's how they're actually living what they're preaching, and especially in wellness,
Yeah.
mindfulness, and, you know, leadership in that sense. It's
Yeah.
like
I know.
don't know so much.
Imposter syndrome. I know. I'm like, who am I to be like a leader in wellness and mindfulness? But it's just going through the experience and putting out the good. I mean, this was my memoir was my third book, and I really want to do like a more self-development book. But then I'm like, who am I to do that? And I'm not even doing it because
Yeah,
I don't believe
that's crazy.
like
Yeah, no, I so get it. I talked myself out of writing that book forever because I was
yeah.
like, I need more life experience, or
Uh,
I'm not Ryan Holiday, Mark Manson, James Clear. No, who would care about
yeah.
Case Kenny? And comes back to what you were saying in the beginning.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a story. You write it from your perspective, and you try to help people. You don't try to impress people. You try to help people,
Yeah.
and you're good. There's nothing to be imposter about. I'm so lucky because the quotes have been really evangelized on the internet, like by big people. Selena Gomez shared one of my quotes
No
last
way.
week, and
Shit.
she's 400 million followers. I was like, that's cool, but like so many like big name, and like Conor McGregor shared one.
Yeah.
Just like talk about like diversity of people
Yeah.
sharing these things, and athletes and all this stuff. And they don't really know who wrote it necessarily. They just know this is a cool quote. And I just like things like that just inspire me just to keep going. And even if I am writing golden retriever language level of mantras and affirmations,
Hey,
it's helping
it's
people.
changing the world.
And there's a big appetite for
Yeah.
that. I think people are craving simplicity nowadays. You have the folks, you've got the Andrew Hubermans of the world, which is amazing. I love his podcast. But some people want human language dubbed down as simple as possible. And I think it helps a lot of people. And it removes a little bit of the barrier of sometimes we overcomplicate things, diagnosis, big language, and you know, it's been cool just to see people rally around that.
I love that because I believe that a lot of people struggle so much because they think to live in a joyful state or be happy takes so much. It's very, like, it's
Yeah.
overcomplicated where it can be like, what would you say the simplest, what are your tools to live in joy?
Yeah, I think the big one is building off that is like we all have this assumption that like a state of joy or a happy life is when you have all the things you want all at once. And I just, as much as I don't never like to be a realist, to be like I don't want to be a delusional optimist, but I've just realized that you absolutely can have everything you want in life. I believe that you work for it, you can have it. But timing of life doesn't always give you all those things all at once.
Mm-hmm.
You might be in the prime of your fitness life, but have a frustrating love life, and you could also have the peak of your financial success, but feel lonely with no friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could find your friends and struggle in your career, and it goes up and down. And to wait to think that you're living a joyful life until you have just a pile of all those things all at once, I think it's setting yourself up for that frustration. So for me, again, this is a self-control mechanism, but it's realizing that if I have one of those things right now, it's a reason to be grateful, and that's a state of joy, and that's a season of life. And there will come another season where hopefully that continues, and we'll pile some things on top of it, but it might not happen, and that's not a reason to not be joyful. Like I do a lot of prompts, and one of the quotes I always repeat is the absence of what I want doesn't negate the presence of what I have. Just because you're able to say I want more or I want better, and it could be very valid that yeah, you deserve more, you deserve better. Just because you could point your finger at what that is, it doesn't cancel out all the things you have. And I think we're uncomfortable sometimes living in ambiguity where two truths can coexist at once. We like absolutes, and we like good guys and bad guys and winners and losers. And I think that absolutism of logic sometimes sets us up to be a little unhappy in a self-sabotaging way. So for me, it's if I have joy, I have joy. If there could be more joy, that's great. But I don't need that more to appreciate the smaller joy I have. Big mindset shift, a lot of self-control involved in that. But I think that's really, really helped me.
I love that. That's, yeah, everything you just said there is perfect. And it's all about perspective. So what's next? Where can we find you? When is your new book? Are you doing more journaling and breathwork events?
Yes. Yeah, I'm actually doing a lot more of the events because talking about the internet, I don't want to just be an internet guy, both from a comfort zone perspective. It's too easy. It's too easy just to be an internet guy. Got to push myself. And two, the real impact is shaking hands and kissing babies. So I want to be out in public.
But then you have your face on there.
It's true. Should wear a mask or something. That's okay. Those are the real people. Like we did
You'll
one.
be like Marshmallow.
I was literally just saying that to my friend. I was like, how do we arrange this? No, but if you're willing to buy a ticket to come to an event, we'll be face to face. We'll have some eye contact. Doing a lot more of those. I'm doing one in New York in a couple of weeks. Been doing a bunch in Miami, doing some for Basel, stuff like that. So
cool.
Usually the format I do is it's like guided mindfulness and then journaling. We're all journaling together.
Yeah.
There's just something about journaling in community with other people, as cheesy as that sounds. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So doing more of those. I got a new book coming out next year, literally a year from now. Those things take forever. So
did you already write your new book, or are you writing it?
I just turned it in.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
How long did it take you?
Not that long.
Yeah.
Maybe like 4 months, just because most of it comes from the podcast.
Yeah.
And I've been doing the podcast for so long. It's a matter of picking and choosing and then adding newness to it. So, I'm always writing. So it's not a matter of like, all right, what should I write? It's just a continuation of that. So it's honestly more of that. I mean, I've been so privileged lately just to like meet so many great people and be able to release so many things. It's doubling down on that, being louder about it. Just, meeting good people.
And where can we get your golden retriever advice? Where can we feel warm and cozy and gentle and soft?
There it is. Definitely on Instagram, case.kenny, podcast, New Mindset Who Dis. Or all my books and journals are on Amazon as well. So whatever form you choose of warmness and golden retriever language, you can find it.
All right. Well, thank you for coming here. I can turn your world upside down and give you some Pomeranian energy right now. But thanks for being here and coming to Austin.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
The big silence. The big silence.